Welcome, beautiful people, and thank you so much for joining us for another session of this very special event, The Sacred Wound as a Portal to Your Awakening, Embracing the Dark Night of the Soul. My name is Charlie Giles, and I am honoured to be your host for this very powerful wisdom sharing event. Before we begin today's session, I would like to do an acknowledgement to country, which is an Australian Aboriginal custom for when two or more people come together. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we are meeting on today and thank them for their continued custodianship of the many lands, seas and waters we have between us. I would also like to acknowledge our elders, past, present and emerging, and thank them for their guidance and wisdom they continuously provide for us. In today's session, we are talking to a very special soul who I am honoured to be hosting, Baljit Rayat. We will be talking about transforming your sexual shadows. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Baljit first. Baljit Rayat is a certified sexologist, authentic Tantra practitioner, Akashic Records consultant and teacher, intuitive mentor, DJ and producer. Committed to raising the vibration of humanity, Baljit has worked with thousands of people worldwide to up-level their lives by uncovering the truths of who they are to the core, creating profound results in their businesses and relationships. She believes everything in this world is energy, and getting to the root of desire by connecting people back to their sexual power causes a powerful ripple that spans all areas of life. Welcome, Baljit Rayat, and thank you again so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to diving into this conversation with you. I think just for the purposes of the topic and where we might end up going with the conversation, it would be really great for people listening to have a bit of an understanding and perhaps a background as to how you got into this topic, how this became your pathway.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. So many years ago, this was like back in 2005 and 6, I had a bit of awakening, but before that, I had a complete breakdown. I was diagnosed with a panic disorder and was having a lot of panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And I didn't realize I was going through deep depression. And through that, I started taking homeopathic remedies, found a naturopathic doctor and a homeopathic doctor, because prior to that, I was on antidepressants. So the panic disorder, the diagnosis came through in 2003. So I had a few years where I was working at an architect firm, like life looked great on the outside, but on the inside, I felt really disconnected. My relationships weren't really working, and I had a lot of friends, but I just felt disconnected. And I was also raised in a very strict East Indian upbringing. So there's just a lot of fear and expectation. So I was like a certified people pleaser. And through that journey of weaning off the antidepressants, I barely was taking them anyways, because I knew I needed to go deeper. The homeopathic remedies and working with a naturopathic doctor woke something inside of me that I was led to the Akashic Records. And for those of you that don't know what the Akashic Records are, the Akashic Records are the records of your soul. It records every word, thought, action, and event. And it's very different from getting a psychic reading, because a psychic will tell you one trajectory. Nothing wrong with it. We all need some guidance. But if we're attached to what a psychic tells us, and we don't do the inner work, the shadow work, the results don't necessarily happen. And then we end up getting mad at the psychic. And that's what would happen to me a lot. I would go to many psychics. So when I found the Akashic Records, it just randomly came to me through an email for a workshop. And then, I met my mentor, and she actually did like a session on me. And it was a 180, because I saw how the illusions that I built up of what I thought life should look like, and how much a victim I was to my own circumstances, to my own reality. So it felt like a veil was just lifted off. And going deeper, there was pieces around my sexual energy that impacted me, like when I got my period and just how unsupported I felt. And it was very traumatic for me, but I never talked about it. And that stuck inside of me. And then it started to play out, in friendships and stuff like that, of feeling like a threat to others because I was threatened by what was down there. So I was like, wow, there's so much depth into this. And then eventually I left the architectural industry in 2009 and full-time went into starting my own business and being an intuitive mentor and working in the records and helping many entrepreneurs and doing tons of readings. And there was just a commonality with everyone who wanted to know what their purpose was. There was a connection to their sexual energy. And I was like, oh, it's like they want to start their business or they want to connect to their gifts and talents. But then there's this piece to the sexual energy that they feel disconnected from. And it's also part of your embodiment, and your sexual energy is your universal life force. And through different kinds of programming, through societal, through our parents, through religion, through cultural programming, through ancestral programming as well, there's a lot of imprinting that tells us this is what sex is, this is what your sexual energy is supposed to be like. And it can really get stuck in I call it the 3 lower chakras, where it's like our solar plexus, our sacral, and our root. And if that is disempowered, our solar is all about power, being in our power. But if it's disempowered or we carry some misconceptions, then it goes into control. And our sacral, that's our creativity. That's also our deep wisdom, our intuition. And that when that's reversed, that goes into fear and even manipulation. And then our root chakra, that's all about security and well-being. And when that gets, reversed, that's about insecurity and not feeling grounded, not feeling anchored. And so there's a parallel with your purpose and your business and just your all-around relationships. So I started to bring sexual energy into the practice of like, we actually not like, we've treated it as like the side dish, but we actually need to make it as the main dish to look at. And when we embody that in our truest form, we're able to really cultivate our sexual energy for the highest good.
There's just so much in that you've already raised. I'm like, oh my goodness,
I just went on, yeah.
Where do I start?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even just that part that you said about the side dish and bringing it into the main dish, that in my head, when you were talking about, how we're raised with the idea of sex, and it's over here and we don't talk about it, and depending on parents and relationships and all these different things and religion, like, really the whole sacred wound part we could just do on just sexuality alone, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when we're talking about people needing to heal and step into their healing, sexuality and everything about sex is just
Yeah, I mean, we're birthed from our mother's womb, right? And that had to involve sex to allow that to happen, right? So it's and even beyond our moms, but just like beyond generations. And there's so much deep wisdom and within our the transgenerational stuff, but there's also misconceptions that may have been passed down that actually don't serve us anymore. And we don't realize that we're actually carrying it through our cellular memory. So it's pretty deep how far we can go with that.
Right. So I guess, you know, okay, it's a big topic, and obviously we can't cover all of that today, unfortunately. But to give people a kind of maybe a step by step, or at least the ability to become curious about it, right? You know, the wounding part, how could we kind of start to take wherever we are from sexuality into a place where we can start to heal and perhaps look at it as a place that needs healing?
Yeah. So the first thing is awareness. That's really important because I've dealt with so many people that on some level they have an awareness, but they know that there's a deflection or an avoidance because it's a scary thing. Like for many, it's like, I don't want to talk about it. This is like too big of a thing. And just having some level of awareness of like, okay, I'm just going to even scratch the surface to acknowledge that something is there is the first step. And we want to be gentle, especially, you know, for someone who's experienced some form of abuse, even if it's energetics or emotional, it can still feel violating. So being gentle, because that also connects to our genitals. And I always tell people, like, how do you feel with your genitals when you're intimate with yourself or with another person? Do you disassociate? Do you feel pain? Do you have some challenges that happens because your genitals are actually speaking to you? And what's easy for some people is to just take some medications or just a few herbs to, you know, help that out. But really, if we were to ask what it needs, just that first step of awareness of like, oh, there's some pain down there, there's some numbness. Those are parts of some trauma responses as well. So just the awareness is the first step. It will guide you to tell you what the next steps are. But if we go into fear, which is common, that's where we can disconnect ourselves from what our genitals are actually trying to tell us and to actually face the shadow. Because it's like, nope, can't go there. Not let's go eat popcorn and watch a movie, right? Or it can even fall into addictive patterns. It could be watching porn. It could be eating lots of sugar, like just wanting to eat. And that's a way of, I call it misdirecting your sexual energy. When we misdirect our sexual energy, we're misdirecting it in ways that actually is not, you know, harnessing our sexual energy, and it doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve the other person or thing that we're interacting with. We are then in this place of disempowerment. So that first step is awareness, and then actually just listening. Okay, how do I notice where let's just say you're experiencing numbness in the genitals. Well, how does that show up? Maybe you have a business. Where do I numb out in my business? Maybe if I get too intimate with my business and, you know, doing a copy or something, I just want to tap out. So there are actual parallels in how we show up in life, even outside of the bedroom, that directly relates to our sexual energy. We've just been programmed, I'd say, through school as well, and through so much programming to disconnect from that and see that as a separate entity.
Right, right. Because when you think of all the other parts of the body that we learn to connect different symptoms to,
Yeah.
we're associating different things there. But when it comes to sexuality or genitals, it's like, oh no, that's different. We don't talk about that. So it's, yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. And so just a little bit more on the shadow aspect, because I just want to have that really clear for people, especially because you know, as you say, it's definitely let's move away from that. Let's pretend that that's not really happening, or it's not really in that area. What other things might that look like? And I guess what I mean by that is, say, for example, there's people who are saying maybe they've had sexual trauma, or they know that they're not connected with their sexuality for whatever reason. But to them, their way of managing it is, oh no, I'm fine. You know, I've got it covered. I'm good. You know, they've kind of got a routine to help them get
Yeah.
through. What perhaps would you say to that person that might be thinking that they've got it all handled, but really?
Yeah. You know, for that person, there's many ways of how someone can show up in their shadows, and that's one of them. The other one could be like someone just wants to hide. That's a common thing of hiding, you know, hiding in your business, hiding in your relationship, hiding around friends, just hiding pieces of yourself that you don't feel comfortable with. Or maybe you feel all these different kinds of things like you just mentioned. So the first, it really depends. Like when I work in the records, I actually tune into where that's actually coming from, like what's the root cause of the behavior. Because sometimes with a person, they're too much in their trauma response. So basically, our genitals are connected to our, you know, our nervous system. So it's connected to, you know, our pelvic region. There's like the hypogastric nerve, the pelvic nerve, the pudendal nerve, and the vagus nerve. And we want to connect to the vagus nerve to calm the body, right? So for someone who may not be like, who have some sort of awareness, but they're not ready to, you know, dive deep yet, I would highly recommend to do some form of like somatic practice that actually gets you in your body and you feel safe in your body. So that could be like breath work. I facilitate a thing through Authentic Tantra called Ocean Breath, and that was originated by Carla Tara. So I would look that up as well. And that's using breath, sound, and even touch, so that you're telling your, you know, your vagus nerve, like you're like, hey, we're hacking into the parasympathetic system, and we're saying we're safe, we're coming back into our body. For some people, meditating and sitting still might be like, I can't do that. So maybe you have to do some form of movement to actually shake things out of the system and to create a state of relaxation. With shadow work, it definitely has to do with working with hacking into the vagus nerve and actually relaxing the nervous system to be like, hey, you're safe. Because if we try to do the shadow work without creating any safe foundation, the person's going to have resistance. And so, and then you're not able to go deeper. They're not able to go deeper to really get to the root cause. And they don't even have to know what the root is, but just even doing some sort of somatic practice with their breath and getting back into their body and with touch creates the safety. And that's what I would highly recommend for sure with doing, I call it shadow work. Yeah.
So I guess, you know, for some people, shadow work does sound a little scary, and, you know, it has this dark connotation to it.
Yeah. Shadow work.
Yeah, shadow work, like, okay. But I mean, really what we're saying is that it's because it's the stuff that we've hidden away, you know, that we don't want to deal with. And whilst what you've explained are some fantastic ways to kind of walk into that, what might that look like for the person? Like, I know it's different for everyone, and I know that's kind of but just to, you know, just to take a little bit, just to shed a little bit of light into the shadow work, so to speak, to say what might that look like for them, rather than the process, if that's possible.
Yeah, I'll actually share my own experience with that, just so it's easier, because I've dealt with so many people and there's so many examples. So for myself, the shadow work is, you know, I actually look at, okay, I've got this pattern, and I keep attracting this. I keep attracting, you know, unavailable men. And how does that show up in different ways? How does that show up in, you know, money? How does that show up with my health? And then actually going into releasing some misconceptions. So how that's actually, created profound results for myself is when we say shadow work, it's actually the most profound, beautiful experience, because you're given this jewel and that's you, it's your truth. And the way that I look at shadow work is like, even your sexual shadows, those are your gems. And when those pockets get revealed, and I call it compassionate detachment, something that I learned. It's like we can have compassion for ourselves and be detached from having judgment. So let's just say, if someone cheated on someone and they're like, I can't go there. But what if you were to have compassionate detachment and be like, okay, I'm going to go there and look at why this happened and see where this is actually really coming from? Then these gems really start to reveal, and you start to see, oh, this is from my mom. This makes sense. And like, I had a lot of stuff around my mom. And then the unavailability was my dad, even though he lived in our house, but worked a lot. Right. So I've had a solid family unit, but there was some dynamics there. The threat, my mom. And it was like, oh, this is where this is coming from. And then I started to see how that impacted my relationships, how that impacted intimate relationships, how that impacted business as well. So when a person starts to do the work, like the inner work, call it shadow work or whatever, you start to reveal the misconceptions that you took on, and you start to see the gems that are like, they are the best things to be revealed, because you start to connect deeper to yourself. You start to connect to your power, which is your truth. And the byproduct of that is you're able to manifest, you're able to express your gifts and your talents. And I don't know, for those of you who don't know, most of you probably don't know, is that I DJ and I make music. So that was a byproduct of me healing so much around my sexual energy, because I was like, oh, this is creative power. This is how I want to use this energy. So you'll start to notice that you feel more connected to your gifts. You feel safer within yourself, that you feel safe to communicate with others and be able to communicate your boundaries. I was so not good with communicating my boundaries. And that goes back to being a people pleaser. And I know many that have been in that people pleaser realm. And you'll notice when you heal your sexual energy and do other kinds of shadow work, it's your boundaries are stronger in a healthy way. They're not barriers. You're just very clear with yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And also just those connections. I don't think, I'm thinking to people that I know who have had different traumas and blocks with sexuality, with sexual relationships, and even myself. And you don't often connect them with the fact that it affects business and creativity. And you just kind of think, oh, yep, okay, well, I have this issue. And it's really interesting, those connections.
Yeah. And I just started to see the correlation over and over. And I just remember I had this one client, he's okay with me sharing this, but he was like, I want to know what my purpose is, and I have premature ejaculation. Take it away, Val. And I was like, okay. But there was a connection, went back to his father and like why, he was feeling, having some erectile challenges, and how that actually related to his purpose. So we don't really think about how things correlate with our genitals and how that correlates with our purpose, our business, and how we show up in life. So it's pretty profound.
We've talked about what does it look like in the process. Why would you want to do it? Definitely some benefits of taking that path of the healing journey. I want to also just kind of address what happens if you just choose not to. Like, I don't want to make it sound like it's a big scary thing, but I do want to address the fact that people are just, no, I'm not going to do that. How can that evolve over time?
Yeah. You know, each of our souls are very unique, and we're all, you know, we all have a different purpose, I want to say. And for some people, their way of evolving is to not necessarily do the shadow work. And that's the thing, is we have to, and this is how, working in the Akashic records, I really started to understand souls in general and how we incarnate on this planet. And so for each person, you know, we know that there's a path and there's a way that we choose to evolve on this earth plane. And for some people, it won't look like shadow work. It won't look like doing the inner work. And for those of us that are doing the shadow work, I feel it's really important to be okay for those who are not doing it. And maybe there's a reason behind it. Maybe because it may blow out their energy and they're not specifically ready for it. One will know because, you know, when we've experienced and allowed ourselves to do the shadow work, it usually calls for a crisis, right? So for me, I had depression. I did not know. I just thought that was normal to cry randomly. Like, I just thought that was normal. It was until I experienced severe panic attacks where I felt like I couldn't be on the planet. And that's when I knew. I was like, okay, time to wake up, Val, because anything else that you've been trying to do is not working. These, you know, antidepressants are not really helping. And nothing wrong with that. But it's for some people, it might take a baseball bat over the head. For some people, it might just be like they just birthed a child and all of a sudden they're like, actually, this birth has impacted me so much and I need to go deeper. And maybe their life before that was, you know, mediocre. And then whatever that child has brought in activated something. So it usually evolves around some sort of activation for someone to trigger that response of, okay, I'm ready, willing, and able. And there's a readiness factor. So if you feel that you're not ready by 70% or over, I always like to say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, and you want to just take a nice deep big breath and connect to the heart. It's like, and having that honest question to yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how ready, willing, and able am I to do the inner work to shift this? If you hear something lower than a 7, it's like, okay, what would make it a 7 or higher? What would I need to do? You might feel, okay, maybe I need to clear out my closet. It might be something physical that you need to do. And it does involve the readiness, and we can't push it if the readiness is not there.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for giving a visual to that too, because I think for some people, you know, there's all this talk about you've got to heal, you've got to do the work, you got to, you know, and it's like, but it doesn't have to be a race. It's not like, okay, once you start, that's it. It's all crazy. It's like, can be really small little steps and just, you know, chipping away.
And even the small steps are major steps. Like it could be someone writing a letter to their younger selves. And just that is, you know, it's funny. I just had a client call today and she was wanting to step out of, you know, her partner's business. And I was like, okay, well, why don't you now write a letter to the business? Because it's not about the partnership of your partner. It's actually the business. That you're ready to leave the business. And then she was like, oh, I didn't even think about that. That makes sense. And everything just started to click in. And that even started to shift energy. So even it could be a micro step that actually creates a huge ripple effect. And eventually you'll just do like a macro leap.
Right. When you're ready and when that energy is shifting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's remembering that everything, I like how you say that with the business, because I mean, everything is a relationship too, isn't it? You have that relationship with the business that we don't think of it that way so often.
Yeah. I mean, we all go through it. I go through it. It's like, it's like you want to learn more about yourself, you start a business or you go into relationship. Yeah. Yeah. Or you have kids, either ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I love where this conversation has gone. So I really appreciate the depth that you've provided, and especially sharing your own experience with that. It's great to kind of have that amount of information for people to, where do they start? You know, what does that look like? What are some of the resources available to them? Um, I'm conscious of time as well, and you know, it's such a big topic. We could probably talk a hell of a lot more, but we know that people only take away the snippets, right? So, um, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about obviously some of the things that you do, your services, whatever programs you might have coming up, and of course your free gift that you have for people.
Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, people can visit my SoundCloud. There's a music tab under baljitrayat.com, and it's BALJITRAYAT.com. And you'll be able to see my services for if you want to get an Akashic record reading. I also teach the Akashic records. I've been a certified teacher for many years, since 2006. And I also have one-on-one work as well. If you feel like you want to do some deeper shadow work into that realm to really align to your purpose and gifts, you can also check that on my website. And then my IG is I am Baljit Rayat. And then the free gift, it's a sacral chakra activation. So I take you on a mini journey to really activate the sacral chakra and just receive that gift that's needed. You can use it as many times as you need if you need like a bit of a tune-up. And I would highly recommend it to actually try it after this call.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. So we're going to have all that information handy for everyone to be able to access, and of course the free gift as well, and all of your contact details so that we can find you and follow you. I just wanted to, I guess in closing, perhaps see if, you know, there's so many times that people will listen to certain things, but we usually tend to take away one particular thing. So if there was someone listening today that, you know, it's resonated with them, what would be one thing that you really want them to take away from being sitting in this place and looking at their...
You know, as you asked that, intuitively felt to share following the energy of intention. So setting your intentions for the day. So when I get up in the morning, it's like brushing my teeth. I always set my intentions of how I want to show up and how I want my experiences to be like. We can never intend how we want other people to show up, because that, you know, other people have free will. But we can send a telepathic message and say, please allow me to have an amazing call. Allow me to be grounded in my power and my truth. Allow me to have an amazing experience with so-and-so if you're meeting them for coffee or you've got a client, and allow the outcome to be more than what I could ever ask for. Energy follows intent. So if you are listening to any of these sessions and you're like, well, I don't think it's going to work for me, then you're going to prove yourself right. So really intend to receive the most out of these sessions and the wisdom. And that's going to allow you to move forward, and your intuition is going to whisper to you and be like, here's where you need to go next. So setting intentions.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. What a beautiful way to close this conversation. Okay, so thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and the conversation that we've had. I think it's been really helpful. Yeah, and yeah, I just want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.